blood, who is not Indian, but American Aborigine, who are not Indians. And then we have black slave blood brought from Africa, treated like animals. And who did that to us? Our brothers, our European brothers 500 years ago. And I apologize. But it is the truth. It is the historical truth. And that is why, on October 12th, I signed a decree. We were forced to celebrate the day that Columbus arrived in the Americas. How can we celebrate that day? The Europeans might celebrate that day if they wanted. We would understand this because that day they didn't discover, but they came to America. But we don't celebrate. For us it was an invasion. It was the beginning of an invasion, an extermination, a genocide.
Fray Bartolomé de las Casas,
Friar Bartolomé de las Casas, in his account of the Chronicle of the Indians, read that book. It's a small book. It's not very long. You can read it. You should read it so you can see, how the history of the law and justice evolved. He wrote a book saying that what's happening was horrible. These people are human beings. People in Europe said that we were not human beings, that we have no soul, that we were a cross between monkey and man, but rather more on the monkey side. That was a terrible thing. But it is part of our history. Colonialism is part of our history. And now, neo-colonialism. And what is WTO saying now? I've told the European prime ministers and heads of state at the summit, I tell them, and they look at me, funny, and they say, where is this Chavez guy coming from? And I have to tell them, how can they ask us to commit suicide, to kill ourselves?
Hagamos un suicidio colectivo.
A collective suicide of our people. Neoliberalism is a path to the suicide of our people. It would be the end, the fifth hell, the final resting place where we will just die of starvation and hunger. It is painful. You say that you were very disappointed when you went to Ghana. Well, you have to fight. The way you're doing, prepare yourself. Go back to your people. Don't stay around here. Don't make the mistake of staying here. Go back to your people. Take your morality. Take your brain. And go fight for your people. It is sad to see how in Africa, the countries where half of the population is infected with AIDS, and no one's doing anything about it. There's not even water to get to these people. In the meantime, people spend millions of dollars every day in intelligent, smart weapons, invisible planes, and we still have to pay our external debt, but now it's become eternal, as Fidel Castro said once. We cannot pay. We pay 3 times the debt, and we still have to pay the interest. We still have to pay a debt that we paid over several times, and it was acquired illegally in most cases, violation legislation. Most of these debt was never addressed and used for the development of these people. It was stolen between bankers and politicians and lots of people. Until when we're going to resist this lack of morality? What do we want? We want the end of the world? We want 1,000 bin Ladens to come out? We want terrorists all over the place? Is that what we want? Are we going to put an end to terrorism using bombs? It's never going to end with bombs. The only way, and I think Jesus Christ said that, it was written 2,000 years ago, the only path towards peace is justice. So my answer is no to your question. WTO is not the way. You will ask me, what is the way then? I think this is the way. This is just one of the ways, not the way. There's never a single way. Africa has to find its own way. I was in Mozambique not long ago, and I was with the president, and we were walking down the street, and we talked to the children and the women and the men, poor people, very poor. and the budget of the country, and then the International Monetary Fund wants to lend $1 million or $1 billion, and then ask for their soul in return, that they renounce their sovereignty. When you say that the International Monetary Fund says that Africa is doing well, Ghana is doing well, that is the IMF. 2 years ago, the IMF says that Argentina was doing well. It's like a doctor, you know, somebody has a heart attack, he's died, and the doctor says, oh, he's doing perfect, it's fine, it's just fine. You know, follow the treatment because it's working fine. The IMF is a bit like that. They don't like me. They don't like me at the International Monetary Fund. I'm on a list. They don't want to lend money to Venezuela. Well, I don't care. We have a dignity and we have our oil. And we have a country that will not die of starvation. Let's hope that someday, you know, the International Monetary Fund will change. They will be able to see reality. They can read the book by Joseph Stiglitz. They read the opinions of George Soros against the savage neoliberalism will fill the world with violence and hunger and misery. We hope that the International Monetary Fund will change. And I'll finish on this. On the day of the coup d'etat in Venezuela, the International Monetary Fund didn't wait one single day, not just 1 hour. Oh, Chavez being taken to prison and renounced, which is not true. I never renounced. And there was a spokesman from the International Monetary Fund on the same day in Washington saying, we will support the new government of Venezuela, this new transitional government. They were supporting the coup d'etat and giving money to the people behind it. The International Monetary Fund. Oh, how democratic they are, this International Monetary Fund. Good luck. Good luck to Africa and good luck to Ghana. And for your dissertation, good luck. I hope it's not going to be assessed by people from the International Monetary Fund.
Can you repeat what you said?
Only my tutor is going to say it, but I'll say that you endorse it. And I'll send you a copy if you'll humbly accept it.
Aprobado. Mi parte aprobado.
I accept. Well, Mr. President, I'm a Mexican, and sadly I see that my country is following a completely different path. I quite respect your ideas on the path that your country is following, and I just want to tell you that I am concerned about one thing. I am concerned, possibly the language of confrontation. I want to know if you are implementing some kind of program, some kind of strategy to avoid confrontation, because my impression is I do not know how right I am because of all the tergiversation of all the disinformation there is. My idea is that there may be people in the upper classes, in the oligarchy, who might possibly criticize the powers that be, but since there is no bridge of communication, there is no initiative on your part, then that might make them defend the upper classes, the oligarchy, more than they would otherwise. Do you have a strategy? I don't know if you have one, because I'd love to see a solution in this, in your country, and not a growth in tension, and I wish you a lot of luck. Thank you, brother. What is your name? Raúl, from Ciudad de Mexico. Yes. Okay, look, Raúl. Yes, in truth. There, I have even publicly accepted that I have made mistakes. I have made mistakes. And occasionally I have fallen into a language that is a confrontational language, certainly often in response, a reaction. Possibly, I don't know, I'm a soldier. I was trained for battle, so often maybe even my lack of experience in politics, in diplomacy, right? So I have fallen. They throw me bait and I bite sometimes. I ought not to. And frequently I am now trying to go forward and holding myself back and not fall into provocations. That one day, this is before I was president, a bishop came along, a Catholic bishop, and he says, you are the Lone Ranger. You're mad. You're the lone madman. Something like that. And the next day I answered. I said, if I was the lone madman, the Lone Ranger, the lone mad ranger, You know what Kimosabi is? That's the Indian that is with a Lone Ranger. So I said, the devil does not respect not even the Sultan, not even the Kazakh. Things like that. After being president too, generally in response, for example, to the media, when they really defame me, when they attack me, but because when the people who follow me, they call them lumpen, that hurts me. And since they cannot defend themselves, sometimes I come out, because I think it's my job. I think sometimes it's my duty. So I go to my radio show. I have every Sunday or TV, or I convoke one of the networks, radio and TV networks, and sometimes I have responded in a very harsh manner, very firm, to that oligarchy who do not respect. But I understand I ought not to assume attitudes that help to incite greater confrontation. One sometimes should keep silent. Most of the times I do keep quiet. Most of the times, of 100, not even one, much less is the percentage where I have actually responded to affronts, to lies, to threats, etc. But okay, I'm honest. I have made mistakes, true. Now, a strategy, you ask. Yes, the strategy is not the strategy of confrontation. No, the strategy, especially in these recent months, our strategy has been to throw out bridges to call for a national dialogue. We have set up 5 tables for dialogue, mesas de diálogo, and many regional, let's say, sites for dialogue. And we've called people to come, and many have not wanted to. Their positions are radical confrontation. We have even called the world. We've called Jimmy Carter, who is the Carter Peace Foundation, to come. We've called the Cesar Gaviria, the OAS secretary. Now we have a tripartite UN commission that has come to Venezuela and soon will come back. And they have drafted now, with the help of Carter and that sort of person, some principles, a declaration of principles. We signed it. It was signed by the representatives, by the political parties. So part of the opposition does not want to sign. Part of the opposition, they're in such an irrational position that Carter was in Venezuela and he spoke to me. And he said, okay, look, I'm going to produce a meeting, Presidente. Where do you want us to hold this meeting? Here in the palace? Is it convenient? I said, sure. I said, no. I said, I agreed to meet them outside of the palace. I told Carter, let's meet at the Bishops' Conference headquarters. And he spoke to the opposition, Carter. They did not want to have the Bishops' headquarters as a conference site. I said, okay, in my hotel. I even accepted that I would go to a hotel and talk to them. Where have you seen a president in his own country accepting to be called over to a hotel by a foreign person? But okay, this was Carter. He came. I had called him. I said, President Carter, you are an upright man. I do believe that. And you do not have a hidden agenda. He said, look, President, he said, the only way these people accept talking to you in my presence is at my hotel. Sure, they did it thinking that I was going to say no because of my pride or something. I said, Carter, I'll go to the hotel. Even with the security risk attendant to this, because this is not a hotel, it's not a secure place. I went. And Carter, I said I would go, so Carter invited a number of ambassadors. About 10 ambassadors came. The opposition did not come. And then they said, Carter, that I had bought off Carter, that I was paying Carter. That's as far as they go, to that extreme, in their lies, in their defamation. Notwithstanding, our strategy is producing results. There is dialogue with union people, with some businessmen. Before coming, I had a lot of work. That's why my voice is a little bit affected right now. This is my voice exhausted by work. Why? Because I was talking with workers, visiting factories, talking directly to thousands of workers, workers in their factories, talking to businessmen. Recently, I went and I went to the National Assembly of the Businessmen of the Estado Bolívar, the largest state, with international businessmen, with investors, with political leaders, with the governors, with mayors, with the local officials. It was an open dialogue open inside, into the country and out of the country. And we're starting to see results. We now have agreements for joint work. We are now signing agreements to reactivate employment, to solve the problems of the country, because that is the other thing. If you ask that irrational opposition, or radical opposition, okay, what is it that you want? What are your ideas? They have no proposals. What they have is an obsession. And it's just a mad opposition, a mad obsession. They don't want to say, they just want to sort of bang on a kettle with an iron spoon. But our strategy is dialogue, is peace, and I have much faith that we will achieve this.
You've been much, no? Yeah.
No.
Quizás más tarde. Después de los otros, todos los otros.
After all the other questions, maybe. Well, I'm a Venezolano, and I'm going along Raúl's lines. I was thinking, okay, what the fact of the case is that there's a real problem in Venezuela, that the part of the middle class is alienated from the process, right? The effects, well, we've seen them, either because of the campaign or whatever, but they just you do not reach them through the Radio Cate kind of strategy. I was reading recently in Venezuela, a great amount of military people have got to deal with this middle class that's quite alienated, and they have to deal with them on an everyday basis, and they would rather just beat on a kettle than actually have a meeting. Now the problem is, what is being done, I don't know, to disalienate that middle class, to integrate them into dialogue, to have them support the revolution, to have them go and vote against the revolution, whatever. One does not see much work on from your administration geared to that class. Unfortunately, those are the people who at one point really had you against the wall. Yes, okay, you do give an important point with your question, a key point, because the middle class in Venezuela, they're not the majority, certainly. Middle class has been struck, has been reduced, but it still is a class that, I don't know, from a point of view of education, it's certainly more educated. There are the professionals. But yes, we do have, fortunately, despite the mistakes that have been made in early years of the revolution, of the democratic revolution, we did not pay sufficient attention to that middle class. We got right deeply into the priority problems, poverty, the marginal people, millions of people, and we did neglect that class, yes. Despite that, we all belong to that middle class. Us, Hector is a minister of education, and he's been a university professor of physics and mathematics, electronics, and electronic engineering for many years. All of us. Among the legislators, they were poets, they were lawyers. You were a lawyer, the minister's an engineer, a mechanical engineer, all of us. The general, he's a retired general, an engineer, a lawyer, whatever. Despite this, we did somewhat neglect that class, and they have hurt us. The media campaign has hurt us. Okay, now we have reacted. And there is a strategy now geared to this middle class to try and make them see what the truth is. And I believe that this is going to have good results in some way. It's not easy because the media avalanche is day by day a bombardment. Terrible, terrible, and terrible, and terrible. Because look, yesterday, for example, I already talked about what happened in Paris with the jackal. What we saw today, this tiny group of people outside with some stuff and with some posters and screaming and so on, shouting. What's most probable is that there was a camera there. It was filming. And what's most probable is that tonight in Venezuela, Chavez was Oxford protest against Chavez, and they repeated and repeated and repeated and exaggerate there, depending on how they shoot it and the close-ups they have and the angle and so on. And they make people think, they make that middle class think that I could not come into this, or that I walked into a room and there was a protest. That they actually cacerolearon, that they banged on their pots against Chavez in Oxford, where there was 500 people listening, and respectfully and asking, certainly with differences, but in a dialogue. That is a strategy that is aimed at that middle class, the protest strategy and the distortion. Because the people they affirm, they don't believe that, but the middle class, yes, they don't know sometimes. To end, there is a strategy that is also a media strategy, but also has something to do with organized work. The week before last, I was taking the oaths at the birth of a front of professionals, intellectuals, and technical people. That's a national movement of professional people, intellectuals, and technical people, basically geared to rescuing, to bringing back the middle class. And look, the middle class, this is something we're designing. We're designing a communications campaign. The middle class has been one of the most most benefited from this project. Look, inflation, average inflation in the previous government period was about 50%. 1 year there was even 100%, another 60%. The average was over 60% inflation per annum in the 5-year period preceding mine. And 1 year there was more than 100% inflation. Who gets affected by that? The middle class more than anybody. In these 3 years, the average is about 20%. That's still high. This year, even higher, but we are going to continue to control inflation. Last year, for example, we beat the record, the historical record in sales of vehicles, of family vehicles. Who buys vehicles? Middle class. Housing, building, apartments, education. We have more university places. We have equipped the universities and technical schools. That favors the middle class. But as you say, they have been alienated in good part.
Yes. So, my name is Mamadou Bokoum. I'm from Republic Senegal Bolivarian. So I would rather call Senegal Republic of Bolivar. So I've been in Venezuela last June. I spent there 3 weeks, and I saw the situation in Venezuela, Dr. President. So I introduced myself. Also, I am a student. I'm doing my PhD in theology. History of theology. So, as I said, I was in Venezuela in the month of June. I saw how the media are covering the situation in Venezuela. So, I just want to give you this piece of advice, which I have been giving you for nearly 2 years now. When I met you in Paris, I told you the same thing in Paris. And this is, just don't do the revolution that Gandhi wanted to do, neither the revolution that Christ wanted to do, if of course, John 1:1 is accurate at all, because John 1:1 says that at the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. Christ understood this passage as that everything is God. So he wanted to do everything in a peaceful void. So some oligarchs in Venezuela, they don't understand this. They don't understand this revolution that you want to do. When it needs to be set, blood to be set, you have to set the blood. I agree with that. So do not do the mistakes that Indira Gandhi did, or the mistake that Martin Luther King wanted to do, or the mistake that Christ did. So go hard and make it tough to them, because who's oligarchy? Thanks a lot.
Well, look. This is a piece of advice that I think it's the third time you give me this advice. In Paris, in Caracas, and now here
Mira, yo vengo de un proceso violento, como tú sabes.
Process, as you know, you all know this.
Y soy hombre de
And I
armas,
am a man of arms.
formado en carrera
I
militar.
was educated in a military career. I have fought in a tank. I have seen the destructive power of weapons. I know what the missiles are, what the machine guns are, what grenades are. And I have seen in practice a battalion of troops using their guns. And then I have seen a military rebellion where there was blood, right? Because this revolution of ours, I have said it is peaceful, but it has not always been peaceful. There are companions of mine who are buried underground, who gave their lifeblood. 4th of February, the 27th of November of 1992, that's where we come from, right? Pick up a rifle, go out at midnight with 500 men, 1,000 men, and some other guys with an airplane, and we even had aerial combat. One plane shot down another. There were bombardments. Well, those days, popular rebellion of 1989, there were thousands of dead people in the Caracazo. The people were out on the streets, and we were sent as troops to stop the people, and what there was a massacre. There was a massacre. Now, once we have taken this path, once we took steps, once we began making efforts, look, yes, sometimes like Christ, with this thing of turn the other cheek. Sometimes you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, my cheeks, they're absolutely martyrized right now. I've taken so many blows, and boom, you put the cheek, and boom, you turn the other cheek. Do you think those people are going to stop and think? They keep on hitting you. They keep on hitting you implacably. Now look, we are making a more than human effort, a superhuman effort to prevent Venezuela again experiencing violence. We do have the strength to do it. We have the force to do it. We have got it. I have told the opposition. I've said, look, don't even dream of trying another coup d'etat, because I did not want to shed blood. On the 4th of February 1992, I gave up my arms. I went to jail to avoid bloodshed. 10 years later, 2002, again I give up. And I give up my arms once again to avoid a bloody confrontation. And I went to prison again. I have said that the third time it's going to be hard for me to do that again. So we do not want the third time to ever come. And we are working very hard for that to never happen. And we have asked the world to help us to prevent that from happening. In any case, I do thank you for your advice, and I will think about it, always.
I think putting Christ aside for a moment, the work of Gandhi and King did not fail because they were ineffective or made strategic mistakes. I think they failed because they were too effective and too much a threat to powerful interests, which caused their assassinations. That's why they failed. And I think one of the concerns that many of us have is that President Chavez not go that way. Because in my lifetime, and I have also spoken about this to the President, in my lifetime, only one charismatic progressive leader has survived the effort to transform the life of his people. Only one has survived all of my lifetime and my knowledge. And that person, of course, is Fidel Castro. And I'm including Patrice Lumumba, Malcolm X, certainly Robert Kennedy, as well as Martin King, Olaf Palme, Dag Hammarskjöld. It's a very large group of people who have gone the way of the assassin's bullet or knife. And we have to hope that this man is allowed to continue his work and not to go that fate, because he is the same type of passion and effectiveness as a leader. On that note, I want to exercise the prerogative of the chair and call this meeting, conference, the seminar to an end, and thank President Chavez very much for spending this time with us. I don't know exactly what the schedule is, but he is on his way to Norway. But I think we have to close now.
The last question.
He has exercised. He has exercised the president's prerogative.
Gracias, presidente. Thank you, Presidente Chavez. I am Minsky. My parents are Chilenos and they had to leave in the coup I grew in Barquisimeto, Venezuela. As I said previously, what I want to tell you now, and to all Venezuelans who are present, we too have responsibilities. Just as we have rights, we also have responsibilities. And the problem of Venezuela, more than anything, is the problem of us, of we Venezolanos. Many of us do not actually do our role, do our work. And I tell this to the ministers who are here too. If we all contributed really and truly with dignity, with no corruption, with nothing, and then we could build a wonderful country. And that is the problem in Venezuela.
Hago la cola en la 10 cada año para que me den la nacionalidad y no es posible. Y eso no es culpa del presidente Chávez, no es culpa de los ministros, pero es culpa de los funcionarios que están ahí. Pasa lo mismo, sacar la cédula en Venezuela es la violación más grande a los derechos humanos que te pueda pasar, ¿entiendes? Cualquier persona, cualquier venezolano lo puede decir. Y por eso yo le digo, presidente Chávez, la gente, yo le entregué la tesis, ojalá que la pueda leer. Yo no soy venezolana, no puedo pedir una beca al Ministerio de Educación porque no tengo la nacionalidad venezolana. En mi corazón soy venezolana y hablo como venezolana y como arepa con suero y caraota y tajada, ¿entiendes? Pero no tengo la nacionalidad venezolana. Entonces, lo que yo le digo, presidente, hay gente que está construyendo. La tesis que yo hice sobre un movimiento de niños. Hay niños de 16 años que están construyendo su biblioteca.
There are 16-year-old kids who are building their book, their library in their neighborhood. I have to say it's up to all of us Venezolans to do something where what happened in Chile should never happen, where people should not be killed as they were killed in Chile. It's up to us. So really and truly, we are going to build, we are going to go forward. Thank you very much. Well, I think your harangue was very good. It's the struggle of every day, because you know that in Venezuela another grave problem and grave harm that was done to the country was corruption that was absolutely unleashed everywhere and was camouflaged and is camouflaged under many guises, camouflaged because it became a kind of an anti-value. Society accepted it. This is something like when a person has been bitten by a snake once and twice and thrice, and that generates then a mechanism, right? The person assimilates the venom and becomes the antibody, and the person becomes immune and is no longer affected. That is what happened to some extent in Venezuela. That bad, yes. Some people, yes. In Venezuela, we reached the extreme once a political leader from one of the parties who are now trying to lead the coup, a golpista. This is a person who now died, was candidate to the president, was president of that particular party and president of Congress and a political leader. At one point he even reached the extreme of saying, in answer to a question about corruption, he said, no, look, here in Venezuela there's no reason for not stealing. There's no reason for not stealing. So the country reached the idea that to steal was normal. And instead, the public official who did not steal was a fool. They said, this man is an idiot. A nerd, let us say. He was through government. He had money, he had budget, and he came out with the same little car and the same little house. No, the guy who came out rich, like many did come out rich, they said, him, he is the great one. This is a gentleman, this is a lord. The one who would not pay his taxes and still the tax evader, he is a smarty. The guy who pays is a fool. These are anti-values. That is corruption. It is moral corruption, the gravest of the problems we have. So yes, I do think your call is important. Now, I want to say something else to you, that looking at the great and enormous accumulation of a great amount of Venezolanos, because we consider them Venezolanos, people like yourself. Before, on the 12th of October, just one day a year was the day that you could become a Venezolano. But now, it's a right, as you have said. And we decided this year, we decided last week that we would have at least 3 or 4 ceremonies a year, nationalization ceremonies, to update people, because there's many compatriots who have been there for years in that kind of situation like yourself, who were children in Venezuela and never became Venezuelan citizens. So and now our constitution accepts dual nationality. You can become a Venezolana and continue being a Chilena, and you have your dual nationality, and you're as Venezuelan for us as is my daughter, who was born in Venezuela. I do ask you something. If you want, please give me your data, and I will instruct the Minister of the Interior and Justice to look at your case, because you are a Venezuelan. You are a Venezuelan. Well, thank you.